The first flower that I'm going to paint in these demonstrations is a pincushion flower or a scabious. And these have a really simple round shape. This is why it's great to start with, great for warming up. And what I want to show in this is, of course, this round sort of button shape. And then those interesting long petals that stick out of the longer shape. And I'm taking my time to observe all of those interesting shapes, those angles that the petals make. And I try to keep them irregular because this is more interesting for the eye. And then there in the middle, we have these different elements. There are a few blossoms that sort of point directly towards the viewer, and I want to pick those out later and show them. And there are also a lot of small elements in the top half of the flower that I want to paint in later. So I'm pre-mixing two colors. I'm using quinacridone pink here and then also perylene violet, which is going to be the darker value, the darker, this really beautiful dark red color. So for the first layer, I'm keeping everything really diluted and loose. I take my big brush and then sort of paint around a few highlights that I want to preserve. So this is where I want to add in these little dots on top later, where there are these small elements that you can see in the flower that are sort of lighter. And as I'm working my way through, I'm changing the color. So I have this lighter color on top and the lower half is going to have this darker perylene violet. And I'm holding my paper at an angle here so that it's more horizontal and the pigment distribution is a bit more even. So usually what you can see here is that I have my paper at an angle, and just for this first layer I want the pigment to be evenly distributed. So I have this lighter value top half, and then down in the bottom half there is a darker value that shows that this half of the flower is actually in shadow. And as long as the pigment is still wet, I can just drop in more pigment, make everything a bit more intense. You know, those pinks and violets are always a bit almost disappointing on paper because the pigments you paint with are never as vibrant and vivid as the actual flowers. But I think those pigments do a beautiful job here. And as the red paint layers are drying, I am going in with a smaller brush to add a bit of sap green for those elements, those small elements below the flower and then the stalk. So there aren't any leaves on this part of the flower. Actually, the stalk is quite long and then there are small leaves attached to it. But yeah, this is, I think, a good starting point for our sketching. Now the red has dried and I can pick out a few of the blossoms that are showing directly toward us, so those small elements. And when you do this, you don't have to add in all of the blossoms that you think you can see. Just add 2 or 3 and the brain will actually come up with the rest. So it will fill in those gaps automatically. And while I'm at it, I'm also adding in a bit more darkness, a bit more contrast to those areas. I'm trying to think about the volume of this entire flower. So it's sort of shaped like a half dome. And that means the light hits on the top and those lower parts will be more in shadow. They will be slightly darker. And I'm showing this here with the darker red, with the perylene violet. And at the same time, I still don't want to overwork this. I'm now adding in some of those small elements on the top. And you can see I took some of them away again because I don't want to have texture in every place. We talked about this already, that you don't need to have texture everywhere. And there's one important detail I want to add, those green dots that shine through the red parts of the flower that are actually from the base of the flower. You can see those green areas shining through, and I'm adding these in with a small brush. So this adds another layer, a bit more of interest. And yeah, I'm also adding a bit of a shadow to those green areas to make them appear more rounded. and just reinforcing a few of those small elements at the top, and I think this sketch is really finished at this point. So this was fun to work on and sort of challenging in its simplicity, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out.